It began for me when I was at a very well-paying job. But I was really unhappy. I decided to go on a short trip to Central America to live on a beach, surf, and just do nothing. While I was there, I found I couldn't really wear shoes. There was an energy coming up through my feet. It was something I'd never felt before. One day, I was lying in a hammock reading a book. It talked about how druids used to practice alchemy in caves, using fire. The druids didn't want villagers to intrude, so they made up stories about how the caves glowed because they were inhabited by dragons. Later that day, I was walking down a beach when I came across this gigantic stone dragon, and the serendipity just hit me. I was living in a story. It was that moment I decided to quit my job and go on a search to discover what was below the surface of my reality. What wasn't I seeing? And was there more to the story that I was living? My plan is to break free from my place in society and travel the length of the entire continent. And so I'm beginning by working my way north to a location up beyond the Arctic Circle. Crossing the Northwest Territories, a Dene man just gave me a small pup, insisting I need a guide dog. It'll be nice to have a companion. I like the name Moses. As I arrive at my starting point, my old life is receding behind me. This location is far from what's familiar, and one of the last places to be touched by this age of information. This is definitely north and definitely outside of my normal reality.
In 1967 or sometime around there, the life changed around here. They have to make a house or somebody give you a house. And then we couldn't get out of town. And that's a hard life we're living in town.
We take this for granted as how society should be organized because that's all we've ever known, that's all we've grown up with. But if you look at how we human beings are living today in industrial societies, it's absolutely unprecedented.
So many people are stuck in stasis. You know, this is the way we do it.
Happiness is attached to material goods, to full employment on that hamster wheel. No matter how much money we have, always needing more because we're bumped up or upgraded in everything we do, so that we're always on the edge of debt.
Debt has no tangible reality. It's an idea, it's a concept, it's in our agreements, it's in our minds, but Essentially, it's not real. And yeah, you know, we have these ideas, these things that we've created, and they're actually destroying everything that we care about, everything of value.
It's not like long ago. It's very different. We don't know money. Even baby know money now. They don't care to live like on the land.
Being here is like being on the edge between an old reality and a new reality. And I can see both of them in the melting sea ice.
We perceive change in relation to our personal experience. All of us who are alive today have grown up in the last quarter of the Industrial Revolution. We look back at the world of 1800 and it seems like it's, you know, such ancient times and people were living so differently then. You know, 200 years, it's a snap of the fingers in terms of geological time.
We left at 6 o'clock at night, and it's now 4 in the morning. Light wasn't exactly right. Light could have been better. But it was a beautiful... This place is unbelievable. And I hope it comes through on film. That's pretty much my main thoughts. I really hope it translates. How will I stitch together all these images of the landscape? My whole world is changing, and I'm becoming aware of my significance and insignificance as a human being.
Human properties, you know, traceable to modern humans, only go back 2-3 million years. Then it digresses off into various areas. And when you figure that the Earth has been around for 4 billion years, and it's only been in the last few million years, that's just a snap like that. So what's going to happen in the next million years? From the human perspective, even our solar system is hardly a grain of sand in all of the sands on the Earth. I mean, it's really insignificant.
Being out here, immersed in this landscape, is so overwhelming. The vastness of it all is humbling. I don't really know where I'm going. But wherever it is, the rush to get there is becoming less important.
I have no doubt that the ideas of progress, the ideology of progress, is ingrained in me. That's in my blood. It's in my bones now. But insofar as I can step back and look at it, I question it. I've lost a lot of faith in it.
Once humans arrived on most continents, we killed off most of the animal life with spear, fire, language, organization, and what we did was replace the animals with fire.
We're using quantities of energy and materials that are off the charts in comparison with what our ancestors used. The speed of our communications and our transportation, all based on sophisticated systems of resource extraction and energy consumption and so on. It's a miracle.
I was born at the beginning of the use of oil, and if I live a long life and I get to be 90, it will basically be gone by the time I'm out. You know, the 80% chunk of oil, the one-time, what's that sucking sound? Oh, that's my people, that's my species, sucking out hundreds of millions of years of storage of carbon all at once and burning it. And I got to ride planes and had 10 televisions in my life and 16 cars, and what a party. And then it'll be over and we'll be back to something else.
Our vision is lighted by the fire that we make. When we look around us at the fire that we have made, that fire makes it very difficult to see beyond reality it creates and into the natural landscape that actually is out there.
There's so many of us that say this is reality. This is the way of this world. And we have to adhere to that. But I always remember, you know, first we make our tools, and then our tools make us.
As a human, I'm useless until I pick up a tool. The moment I pick up a tool, I can begin to make change.
I cast my imagination down into the heart of Wall Street, and you see the stock exchange. And you realize the enormous power that whole complex has to organize the world and to drive it in a certain way in order to make wealth.
We externalize the cost, so is the cost of the thickening atmospheric blanket in there? Is this ocean acidification in that price? Is cancer in humans in the prices? Dead zones that just increased 1,100 square miles to 8,000 plus square miles. Is that embodied in there? Is the extinction of salmon in there? Those line items are not embedded within that. There's just the notion of profit and the fallacy of ever-expanding growth. There are finite limits to certain resources, and not just in their quantity, but the implication of their extraction and manufacture and disposal. We run the risk of what I think sets the final boundary as we get to the edge of the planetary petri dish is the fouling of the nest syndrome, which is really that the addict doesn't necessarily die because the drug runs out. It's just that the alcoholic's liver gives out or the smoker's lungs give out. And at the planetary level, yeah, we have hundreds of years of coal left. Peak coal is further out on its arc than peak oil or peak gas. But the atmospheric capacity to sequester the byproducts of those things is not 400 years out.
We are the asteroid that hit the planet. And the last time a really major thing like that happened, the change in temperatures and gradients and so on caused the rise of the mammals, out of which we came.
I'm frustrated, and I find myself wondering, how does progress affect us as individuals? Right now, it all seems so destructive and hopeless.
We're never looking for quality. We're looking for quantity all the time.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a crazy world, eh?
Yeah.
The positive-negative distinction needs to be looked at pretty closely. It's that destabilizing or negative process that often will cause a system to break up and reform itself at a higher level.
I want to believe that you can change, but the only way you can change is if you're scared enough to do it. Sometimes it is good to hear how bad it is or how bad it could be, because that wakes you up.
I guess where I was 5 years ago is that I knew what really agriculture was about, was working with nature and producing food that was incredibly healthy for people to eat, not just producing mountains of cheap food that wasn't nutrient dense. But I was still having problems of seeing how to get out of that whole system that I had been in for years and believed in. A lot of our systems were starting to break down, and then the land wasn't right either. A lot of people started to really question what they were up to and what this whole agricultural industry was really about.
Industrial agriculture is really defined by its reliance on fossil fuels. It's based on farm machinery, tractors, other fuel-fed machines, and also the use of fossil fuels to make fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. Its very essence is a form of warfare with the natural world. We want to reduce the amount of biodiversity so that we can grow food for human beings. It's the greatest single source of environmental degradation of anything that human beings do is producing food.
We know that what destroys civilizations is when we abuse the land.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing down across the whole plains here. We're abusing our land with all these chemicals and fertilizers. The land's about producing our food. It's about having a healthy ecosystem where wild animals can also coexist with us. And we're going to turn it now into producing our fossil fuels so that we can keep doing the same thing, not change. What's really gross isn't the actual act of slaughtering it. We have no gratitude anymore for our food and where it comes from. You get into these big packing plants and everything's slammed around. There's no sanctitude left in our food anymore. The animal gave its whole life to us, We're almost dysfunctional and disconnected from our whole food source.
Farmers have to understand systems. We can't always play that we are the dumb farmers. I'm a very professional person in my line of work, and it's not because I have a PhD or an XYZ or whatever. I have 25 years of applied research on this place, so I understand what's going on here. Why do we have to stay within that box? Slow it down so that people can have a chance to revisit in agriculture what they can grow for that local economy.
Bison are as close as I can get to being sustainable. Yeah. I've done all the crazy systems and believed in it, but man, when you realize how wrong it all is, you feel a little bad about it, but you move on and try and create something better.
Traveling from place to place, I'm beginning to realize how complex it all is. It's clear people are working to change, but I want to go deeper into that story about us as a people, moving beyond this industrial age.
We're so consumed that we think this is reality. It's almost like we're not ready to cross that threshold. We might be able to see it, but we're just not able to even imagine what lies beyond.
You can't stop progress, because progress can be good. But the thing is it's the pause. You know, it's like asking yourself why, you know, and so you go slower, but nobody wants to slow.
One of the things that's peaking now is people's sense of time. They don't have enough.
We're always living in the future. We think as soon as we tidy the house, as soon as we make this much money, as soon as we get this job, as soon as we have this house, as soon as we have a couple of kids, as soon as, then we'll be there. And of course you're there and it's not there, and it's up the road yet again. And at the end of your life, you look back and say, where did it all go? And so that's an illness.
What do you mean you don't have enough time? It's timeless. What is it you want? Become clear in what you want. And you'll find that what you want is already here. But what's going to satisfy you? It's not the things that are out. It's what's inside here.
There's a practice which turns you inward and which is non-conceptual and which has to do with down-regulating the nervous system, slowing down completely so that you're able to perceive more clearly than somebody whose nervous system is constantly being stimulated. So this is a very critical thing, that there is an actual practice that affects transformations not only in the mind but also in the brain structures, so that we can actually shift how the brain operates through another kind of conditioning, mental training.
Right now, spending a lot of time driving, shooting on the way too. I stop and shoot all the time. Landscape is beautiful in every direction all the time, so I've written across my dashboard that the purpose is not to drive, the purpose is to film. So it's always a reminder when I see something beautiful to stop and take the time and not feel caught up by a destination.
We have no stillness anymore. We have no quiet places. We're really bombarded with stimulus. And I think that's part of that unwillingness to look inside, you know, because everything is external. It's all this feed coming in from outside.
There is a field of information as well as a field of energy. Not only is there the process of how do we withdraw that information, but you need to replace that with new information. We're kind of going through a loop, both a neurological loop and you could say it's a loop of story. And it doesn't mean you ignore the story, but it's helping people go, oh, okay, I can connect with something else that can inform this story to help it heal.
I expected to be in Montana a week ago, but one thing leads to another, and doors keep opening where you don't expect them to, and connections keep happening that you didn't expect. And that's the way it works. That's the way the process occurs.
I'm really learning how to go with that process versus resist it. In essence, I'm really learning how to let go. Let go of control and let go of my ideas and just be open.
There's a process that just leads to no process at all. It's pretty incredible.
A lot of the success of being able to work this way is being able to get out of the way. Your movie is not your movie anymore. You've stepped out of the way, and there's this other thing that's doing the movie.
If you're willing to spend time, doors open.
It's funny how the world changes. It's almost like continually waking up from a dream. You know, we think we're living in reality and it all seems so solid, and then something changes. I think we have a lot of those kinds of experiences ahead of us.
I'm at Angel's Peak in northwestern New Mexico, south of Mesa Verde, north of Chaco Canyon, where I'm heading next. I've been checking out all the old Puebloan sites, and it's extraordinary. As extraordinary to think about them being there as to think about them leaving.
All the space and time on the road is beginning to take hold of me. There's something out here in the silence. I feel like I'm waking up to something that was here before our human story. The same story that will be here long after we're gone.
This is about sensuality, sensitivity, coming to our senses, engaging our senses, enlivening our senses.
When did we begin to forget our place in it all?
Everything we now speak of as Western civilization is largely born of a particular technology that we call the alphabet. Each writing or form of writing engages our senses in different ways. More non-alphabetic or more pictorially derived scripts where written characters are often drawn from shapes in the surrounding sensory world. The characters still function as windows opening onto a more than human field of meanings. But with an alphabet, the written images are no longer imaging anything out there in the surrounding world. Instead of acting as windows that open onto that larger field of animate meanings, the written letters of a phonetic alphabet function as mirrors, reflecting the human face back upon itself. When I start to read with an alphabetic script, I enter into this closed loop with my own signs without the land having any part in this interchange.
People can't perceive invisibles in the world very well anymore. They can't perceive connections, they can only perceive pieces. So in a way, what we're experiencing in the world is a byproduct of our psychological orientation.
I just remembered Thomas Banyaka, who was an old friend of mine, as a Hopi elder. He walked up into Walpi, a village on one of the higher mesas, and was walking through the village, and he saw this blue light. And he remembered elders in his time telling him that when the blue lights are in the pueblos, this means that the end of the world is coming.
Some people have about 4 TV in their house. Every room got TV. You think the children will go back to the land? No way. So easy, life like just watching TV, and they don't know what's out there.
This is really conditioning us. It's conditioning the world psyche.
We've created a whole world of fantasy through this incredibly powerful media because, again, that media is being handed over to private interests that don't have the public interest at heart, no matter what their advertising says. Corporations are not designed for public interest. They're designed to make money. It's very disturbing because they're incredibly powerful. They play on every single emotion that you have, and they are focused on things.
You go to the city and people are so engaged in human relationships. That's what's going on. And what else would they know? They've seen the Planet Earth videos, maybe 1 out of 50 people. You know, fascinating, cry a tear, get back online. And, you know, really, that's serious. People understand that there are issues out there. But really, the world is the street, the cars, the technology. Your high school kid graduating today in the United States knows less words than a high school student that graduated in 1950. And of the words now, 30% of them are currency of the day. There won't be words in 20 years, let alone 500 years. Picture all the words that define the technology du jour, the moment that a human's involved with. And that state of, that narrowing, that darkening of literacy, of consciousness, of language, of story, of remembrance, of ancestry, and the ability to project into time in the future is all narrowing down to the moment of your Twitter.
As a society, we pride ourselves on the notion of literacy, the read and write arithmetic thing, but the majority of our modern civilization is probably the most ecologically illiterate population of people the planet's ever known. And ecological illiteracy is probably the gravest epidemic we face. And so then it really leads to the work of the day, I think, is ecosystem restoration. What's the new story we're going to tell? What's this restoration of the ecosystem so that we'll change our behaviors to get to the big work of restoring our ecosystem?
I think that kind of overview issue about teaching people to see, it's part of the underlying issue of teaching people to investigate and understand. Getting people to trust themselves relative to what they see and to break free of the really heavy propaganda that media is full of.
legally, we own the airwaves. Most people feel that the broadcasters own the airwaves. They don't. They're only leasing them from the public. So anytime the public says we're not satisfied in the kind of programming we're getting, at that point, immediately, broadcasters have a strict legal obligation to change their programming. So the key problem is not with the broadcasters, it's with the public. It's politics. It's the politics of media. It's the politics of our collective consciousness. It's the politics of saying, look, we need to talk. We need to come together, have a conversation about our common future. And we can amplify it with television.
Today, we still have that beaver bundle as a reminder. You know, some of those old stories, where we have come from, and how we're connected, you know, with this whole idea of space, where you are just as much of a star as those stars are a part of you.
Language lives in the land itself, and everything speaks. The stories carry the information, but the land carries the stories.
You begin interacting with the original language and the original communication. In the ecosystem, everything is language, whether it's chemicals or whether it's electromagnetic communication or whether it's pressure or light. It doesn't really matter. There's constant communication going on. The language we have is only an imitative form. It's a mimicry of the language that was here originally, long before we ever showed up.
Out here in the landscape, days are turning into years. I feel like the culture I was living is being pulled out of me, washed away, leaving open an empty space. I don't know what comes next. I keep thinking about this phrase I heard recently. You need to have roots to have branches. Maybe when the roots penetrate deeply, I'll remember who I am. But first I have to let go of some ideals that no longer serve and replace them with a new story. The stories are the roots.
Our being is like a repository. You're putting it away, you just don't know where it's going to make sense. And again, it's just like all these stories. My God, those older folks, they have a story for everything.
One side is guided by fire, then the other side is guided by the memories of when all this creation had come into being. And that light of that first day.
Part of, I think our lives is to open up new worlds, but part of it is to also restore. So for me, the philosophy here is that let the land tell us what to do. How do you listen? I feel the best teacher, if you want to see a bloody tooth, go into the natural world, because that will tell you more, and you'll learn about death, birth, death, birth. And it's embodied learning.
Living as a vagabond in these in-between places, I think I'm finally beginning to understand. In the end, there's no way of escaping myself. And eventually, I'll run out of directions to turn. This story leads nowhere. When I ignore all the signs, how do I figure out the next steps? How do I find my way forward?
Everything starts with desire. Your choices are made on your desire. Your desire is based on what you value. And unfortunately, we value the wrong things.
I initially just wanted to do less harm. And then I started looking, and you start seeing how all of this is connected, our hyperconsumption, the state of our soils, our forests, just this massive array of planetary problems we face, which is totally overwhelming. You almost don't even know how to process it.
I'm really feeling lost, trying to figure out what the fuck it's all about.
The name you are given as a species is Homo sapiens sapiens. To be sapient means to know. To be sapient means that we know that we know.
Part of what we all do is we design ourselves. You actually design who you are. You can be whatever you want to be. You can see the world differently to this person and that person.
There's a principle of self-mastery, and it's between vision and reality. Continue to clarify and refine your vision, and that honest assessment of like, where are you really at? Where are we really at? And that uncomfortable space in between, whether we see that as an opportunity that empowers us, or whether we get disempowered and lower our vision and go back to sleep and turn on the tube and eat popcorn or whatever.
As a person, you need landmarks. And we don't have them. And we don't even care to have them. Landmarks say who you are and where you are. And sometimes in this wild lifestyle, Wild West lifestyle we have, we don't want to be found. We don't want to know who we are because we have to deal with it.
Because then you have to face yourself.
Yes, you have to face yourself, yeah.
I'm lonely and I'm road weary and I'm going through all these other things that are inside me. I'm struggling. I can't go back because I have too much pain inside. And again, this is all self-indulgent bullshit, and you know, but that's at the crux. That's what I feel that I'm going through. I'm forcing myself into a situation where I'm becoming an ascetic because I have to be alone because I can't deal with the pain of the world because it hurts too much. Yeah, at the same time, I take on the pain of the world because I want to fix it. So I'm fucked. Either way.
Earlier in the interview, you and I spoke about intentionality, how important it is to have a motivation which is based on compassion, that you really want to end suffering for all beings, not just yourself.
The film process is still continuing and I'm still working on the film. It's this like crazy balancing act of how do you not take stuff on so that you can be present in the world versus how do you take stuff on to deal with it so we can move on to a new paradigm together. It's like there's another way. And it's all perfect. The shit is part of the learning. The shit is part of reaching higher consciousness. Let's just fucking get there already. Because this isn't fun.
People who don't change their value system collapse. The upside is we can change incredibly fast because we're not trying to deal with biological evolution so much as cultural evolution.
There's a story that you've been made for. And it's discovering purpose that's connected to that story. So this comes back to the story of starting over, where a people start over. There's devastation. The people are decimated. And there's seemingly nothing anyone can do. And then one person, they just go, wait a minute. I can do something. And by doing that, something comes.
You know, these are impossible times, but also impossible times are an opportunity to shine in a way that we might not have thought possible before.
Choice is about bringing oneself to something, actually having an awake consciousness that says, yes, this, but the capacity to make increasingly whole, sane, creative choices, that's the piece that really needs to be built.
It's not so much that you hold the knowledge. It's all about timing.
The fire that is burning is there is another way out there. We can still believe in the hero's journey. We can still believe in myth and story and making our own story for ourselves. We are capable of achieving great things.
As the electronic environment goes, so goes the physical environment. And if through the electronic environment we see the challenges authentically that we face as a species, and we see the promise of new innovative alternatives, we're on our way. Because if we can see it, we can believe it, we can create it. So to free up the social imagination, it's an imperative, it's critically imperative that we free up the media to look at the challenges to our future and the opportunities that will support moving towards other forms of sustainability.
What is sustainable? What are we trying to sustain? That's the key question. Are we trying to sustain the American lifestyle? Obviously trying to maintain the American dream is not sustainable, but nobody's willing to give that up yet.
I've been on the road for 4 years, and I can't keep living this way. I have this deep urge to stop and be still for a moment, to be connected to a single place.
That inward understanding is what makes for a person to become indigenous. Indigenous means that it's coming right out of that particular place. And that's this particular place, and I'm grounded and rooted. And the land identifies me and gives me an identity and recognizes me.
That's where we need to move back to as a species. I don't over-romanticize that, but in general, if you're completely dependent on the place that you live to be able to survive, after a few generations, you usually figure it out. One of our problems is we move around so much, we're so peripatetic that we never really stop long enough to figure it out. We assume that we can sort of technologically avoid having to figure it out. But we're coming up against the limits of that kind of thinking now.
The pattern of the last 100 years or so has really been one of imposition and hubris and control and command. And so we impose design upon a place without any regard for the flows and the natural conditions and the site uniqueness and the on-site resources. We just wipe the slate clean and then bring in what we want. And it tends to be fairly artificial and fragile with respect to its need for maintenance because it's so dependent on the importation of externalized resources.
Really learning to read and understand underlying patterns of place is the key to being able to live sustainably in it. So to be truly sustainable is to actually be expressing that underlying rhythm, right? And discovering it and then working with it.
All right, what do we do here? How do we learn about what we do here? One thing to do is to pay attention to natural systems. Let's start watching at scale, and let's collect data. We have some extraordinary technologies available that can expedite something that maybe would take hundreds of years for a family and a tribe to tell tale enough that the great-great-grandkids just pick up the story. They're not reading it in a book. But we have a lot of books, and we have Native Americans here who've got enough fragments of story that we're calling them in, they're calling us in, and we're spending a lot of time together to try to remember.
We don't have all the answers individually, but if we just surround ourselves with who and what most astounds us, the answers come, the community comes.
We began thinking, okay, could we learn from this natural model, and can we begin to not just go back to nature, but where we can, re-engage the forest, and also use technology to mimic it and interface with it. Because we can't simply go back. We've done too much damage, and we can't just deconstruct our cities. And we began studying the economics of how much is hemorrhaging versus how much we're going to spend on infrastructure to try to fix and protect us. And we saw that we hemorrhage so much cash and so much water and so much resources that if we were to move away from the centralized mechanical structures exclusively and move back to these nature-inspired, nature-mimicking solutions, we wind up creating a lot of jobs, reconnecting neighborhoods and building strength, building it to be more terror-proof, more climate-proof, more resilient.
So you have compositional, you compose with the system, humility-based design versus impositional, hubris-based design. So then we begin to say, well, where is the sun? Where is the wind? Where is the water? What is the soil? What is the wildlife? How does this work? What is our climate? What is our weather? And how do we work with those systems to leverage off their flows to amplify our success? So we work within nature versus against nature.
It's pretty simple when we start looking at everything like an ecosystem. When I go to city council meetings or planning meetings or permits. It's like, I must remember natural succession modeling, and we have to set the stage for the answer we want. That's good natural design. You know, it's going in there and saying, they're idiots, you need to change, you need to serve us. Now we're talking about a different pathology that doesn't have anything to do with this. If we look at natural systems, there's no judgment in the circle. You know, it's like the meander in the river gets cut off and that part just isn't fed anymore. It'll be reassembled from a system that exists. And it's done it forever, we'll do it forever.
As our cities developed, we built more and more infrastructure. And so there was nature that did everything. Green infrastructure, natural infrastructure. A forest is a great model of a whole system. Every single civilization that forgot its trees and let them go began to break down and disappear. We've lost the manager of the whole. We've lost the ability to ask, where is the whole? And we have it intuitively, innately, but we also need to train more people to be looking and helping and facilitating that whole view.
When trees grow up, not only do they open up the soil and allow water to soak into the soil, they help store the water in the soil in the form of organic material, but the trees themselves are mostly water. So when you're looking out at a treed landscape, you can see it as a forest or a collection of trees, or you can see it as a standing lake. So the point of that is the more water that's actually stored in the landscape and it's being slowly released over time, the more water is available to support life. So that's what a local exchange system does. You know, when you have a big box store, it's flushing the money out of the community. Whereas when you're holding the money and circulating in the community, it can circulate many, many times before it leaves again. And it's building storage capacity, complexity, richness into the system.
It is funny how the world changes. With every frame I capture, I get closer to that dragon on the beach and the discovery of a new story that's rooted in place. A story about remembering and regaining that broader sense of what it truly means to be home.
The thing that I think is really important about doing things locally is that the feedback loops are much shorter and they're much higher quality, so you're much more likely to run into the unintended consequences of what you're doing than, you know, if you do it 500 miles away or the other side of the planet. One of my typical things that I do is I'll take out a pen, you know, and I'll go ballpoint pen, you know, a few different kinds of plastic and metal, some stuff called ink. We can all imagine what it took to manufacture this thing. But the reality is, I know absolutely nothing about the actual journey that the molecules in this pen have taken to be here in my hand in this form. And I also know nothing about what will happen on the day that this pen stops writing perfectly and I throw it to that mythical place away. So that's a pen. It's not a cell phone. It's not the 20 tons of resources that it took to make my laptop computer. It's not a car. It's not a house. It's not a city. But the reality is, we actually know almost nothing about what's actually going on as a result of virtually everything that we're doing. And yet we're living with what I call the great modern myth, which is that we know what we're doing and we're in control. And clearly we don't, and we're not.
Doesn't mean that the system should be shut off from the rest of the world. You know, on multiple levels, I don't think that's a good idea. I personally have no problem with the idea of globalism, global exchange of information, global exchange of cultural and material production. I think we do really stupid stuff in terms of working globally, partly because we're not paying attention to this idea of building a network of global exchange out of the inherent integrity and health of local places.
No somos separados porque nosotros somos parte de la comunidad. Nosotros somos lo que somos porque vivimos en una comunidad. La riqueza de esa comunidad es lo que nos permite crear nuevas condiciones, innovar.
The problems of society have always been the opportunities for business. So in a pure business sense, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of money to be made, a lot of successes in a pure earthly sense. We just have to make this shift from technologies and metrics that no longer serve.
Estamos siendo parte de un proceso acelerado y tenemos que pensar cuál va a ser el siguiente paso, en qué dirección vamos, a dónde vamos. No podemos seguir en la misma dirección que vamos. Tenemos que repensarlo y podemos cambiarlo. Hoy podemos cambiarlo.
We should begin to think more about this idea of global, decentralized localities. Places that are, if not self-sufficient, are more sufficient than any other place might be.
This middle photo is what the view from right here looked like in 1994. In 1996, we started planting. We first planted the rain by creating water harvesting earthworks, and then we planted the vegetation. 90% of the species are native to the Tucson Basin, so we've created an island of the Sonoran Desert ecosystem within the urban core. But this is all food. So here's a desert ironwood tree. These seeds, when they are brown, you pop it out, and these taste just like peanuts. We have a European olive, pomegranate, the mesquite tree, nopal cactus here. You can eat the cactus pads as nopalitos. All of this growing in what before was just a sterile strip. So I like to start here because this is not our property. Everything I've shown you since we've come outside is public property, but we forget that it's public. And all too often, there's nothing growing, people just park their cars there. It becomes just more street. We wanted to reclaim the commons for life, for the plant life, for the wildlife, for us, for food production, for flood control, for passive shading and cooling, all this. We get a lot more people and neighbors walking up and down here than we did before. And that feeds back into more community because we see those neighbors. It makes it safer. We got neighbors looking in. So, all that.
Okay, so we start like that. It's like where we put things, you know? It's like there's natural systems that have different connections in different parts of the ecosystem or different parts of the forest. We just start modeling it like that. And all of a sudden, we're not using plants and animals, we're using products, services, and skills. It's just like an ecosystem. What we really need to do is examine a process, a pattern of participation in the landscape, including ourselves.
What happens if a corporation that operates, let's say, multinationally in many communities is saying, okay, this community has these qualities. And what would it mean to enter into a place like this, working with local people in such a way that we were continuously growing their ability to contribute to the culture of that place, while they're simultaneously contributing to, you know, producing what it is that we're producing. And what if beyond that, the material flows were somehow engaged in a continuous interaction with their processes that enable this place to be alive? right? So that we were actually plugged into the overall health of that ecosystem.
El mundo está cambiando, el mundo está procesando muchísima información, muchísimos cambios. De alguna manera el mundo está despertando, está como tirando por la borda las cargas pesadas, lo que no nos sirve, el ego, el egoísmo, la envidia, el drama, el miedo. Al final lo que estamos haciendo es reaprender cómo vivir sin todo eso.
The dragon's now just around the corner, and I've come to realize that in every breath, I speak something into being. A new story is emerging, along with a newfound sense of my individual place within it.
Okay, what's my story? How do I not just have the chattering voice in my head of this ego mind or this cultural paradigm of lack that no matter what I do, buy, believe, I'm not enough. And so breaking out of that cultural paradigm and finding our true voice, it's having a good compass. Your compass of how to be a good human being, principles of ecology, how does nature function? That principle center, I think, is key because there is no roadmap for where we are or where we're going, but principles that are timeless and true and woven through the fabric of life with exactness and beauty. Different strategies, right, of how communities adapt and respond, but that there are these principles woven through the fabric of life.
People are always going, but what do I do? I don't know where to plug in and how to respond. And the really good news is that the guidance system, and we all have it, and it's what you're attracted to. You do what you're attracted to. What is beauty to you, don't throw that away. And we've been told that, no, that doesn't count. You know, we're not meant to be going after those beautiful things that inspire us. No, that's exactly it. And this is where there's something just so powerful, magical, and beautiful about the way the planet works and speaks to us. Is if you strip away the attractions that have been perverted by the media and just find what actually attracts you and what feels good, you'll go right to what will feed you back the most.
I keep saying that we have to embrace sustainability not because we fear the future. We have to embrace sustainability because we love the things we love about the present. It's the only thing that makes sense, the only thing that will ring it true, that we could speak it into truth. It's the way that we could make it happen.
The most we can do is clean up our own lives. I mean, that really is the most. The way enough people get it is to have enough people actually doing it, right? Because it's over the back fence. Everyone's looking over the neighbor's fence saying, you know, how come they're doing so much better than I am?
All these little axioms like, don't make your hobby your business. Or the realtor would say, don't fall in love with a piece of land. I say, fall in love with a piece of land. Make your hobby your business. Make your hobby your only reason for a business. That commitment to place and purpose is essential, I think.
Just make sure that your handprint is bigger than your footprint. If you care about this or that, get out there and do something over there, and I guarantee you that more people will go over there to see what you're doing, right? You know, when you put the right thing in the right place, that's design. Then we kind of remember, oh yeah. We don't have to riot. We could use half of that much energy and start planting areas. We can change those dynamics just with that understanding. It doesn't have to be like this. It's kind of set into motion.
There's enough resources, and not the hell with the resources, there's enough knowledge on this planet of how to encounter the natural phenomenon that every man, woman, and child should have plenty of water, plenty of food, plenty of shelter, everywhere, all over the world. First and foremost on this planet above everything. And it's doable. Right now, humanity is on survival mode, pretty much like a pine tree growing out of rock. That's our existence. If you put people in a fertile situation, which by fertile I mean is not draining all their energy for a mortgage payment and a utility bill and the stress of a job they don't like and so on, they would bloom. Who knows what humanity is capable of?
My fundamental perspective is nature doesn't make any mistakes. Even the most devout environmentalists believe nature makes mistakes, and the mistake nature made was us. The thing is, after 40 years of work, I trust nature. My trust is complete. And she may do as she will with me. When you look at the environment as a living organism, everything that emerges is there to fulfill a specific ecosystem function. So the question is not, why do we do what we do? The question is, what is our ecological function?
It's taken years to get back to the original dragon that inspired that concept of a search. You create a story for yourself. It's a rock that has propelled me all the way through the continent. It doesn't change the reality that it's just a rock.
When you begin to look at the human in all of our dimensions, we're this incredibly finely tuned machine created by the ecosystem. You know, the earth doesn't feed anything it doesn't need. And we're fed, and we are fed extraordinary energies. Inspiration, creativity, passion, compassion. They all fuel us. For what?
So it becomes a process of being a myth maker. There's this idea of creating stories and myth making and a storied landscape and constantly making myths over and over again and seeking out those myths and finding new objects to make myths around or to drive you forward with vision and purpose. Even if really at the end of the day, on some level, it's kind of impermanent and meaningless because it's just a rock and
Todos sabemos la verdad, todos. Pero nos da miedo aceptar la verdad. ¿Por qué? Porque la verdad contradice todo lo que ha pasado. Contradice todas nuestras normas sociales, contradice todas nuestras religiones, contradice todo. Es como estábamos viviendo una obra de teatro o una película y de repente esa película se termina. Aceptar que esa obra ya se terminó y aplaudirla, agradecerla, para poder iniciar la nueva obra. Estamos cambiando de obra. El teatro es el mismo. Por lo tanto, la estructura es la misma. Lo que está cambiando es la visión que tenemos con respecto a esa obra.
Can we catch the wave that we've helped create and ride that wave to another order of expression for the planet? That, for me, is the only really interesting challenge that's facing us now.
You got basically three choices, I see. One is to get into agreement with what is, totally lovingly, and enjoy it. And two is to change it. If it doesn't suit you, arrange to change it. The situation, whatever it is, might be a little thing or it might be some huge thing, but change it, you know? And the last one is you lose. You lose. And all hesitation is loss.
I feel that there will be many voices in this coming time that call the human heart into seeing clearly and into loving action. I feel so lucky to live in a place where young people come and they have a sense of, I need meaning in my life. I need morals in my life. And I feel that there are many elders today, many people who've suffered, indigenous peoples, but also people who have received, a Western-style education, who are really carrying a message of conscientiousness.
Por primera vez tenemos la posibilidad como humanidad de poder encontrarnos en el aquí y en el ahora, sin máscaras, sin barreras, sin fronteras, sin pasaportes. Las antiguas sabidurías le llamaban el todos somos uno, un solo corazón.
Some things have to be believed to be seen. But when we're open to being in communication and recognize that to restore our world, we have to restore our lives. You're like, what's my story? What's my part? And of course, they're right. There is no me, my, or individual I on this little blue planetary marble of Marvel and relations. Spinning around the sun at some 67,000 miles an hour right now. Spinning around the sun in a solar system that sits on the arm of a galaxy that spirals the same as our blood and our bones and all things that flow and grow. And it's all around us, right? It's always out there.
There's this infinite patience. So if we blow it this time, there'll be such pain, but of course, there will be some kind of continuity, you know. I take solace from the fact that the cells, that make up our body are basically indestructible. And that what constitutes my flesh was born in the heart of stars, and will be endlessly recycled. And that it'll all start again, and so on and so forth.
The word indigenous is kind of important. It means, you sort of belong to a place. I have made many pilgrimages in my life. And to be a pilgrim is to make every place your home. But what's kind of interesting is that you leave home in order to discover home is everywhere. That you really come home within your own heart. And then you become responsible to every being and thing and place you encounter.
There is a fourth way, and that's the witness. Now that is very, very hard to do. To just sit there and, be the watcher on the hill and witness the whole thing.